Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining today's WorkComp Blitz, Ask the Experts Coronavirus Edition. And I'm Josh Diggs, Director of Claims at Orion Risk Management. As usual, we're joined by zbrown, partner at Orion Risk Management. And today, we are very lucky to have Brent Rose, attorney and founder of Black & Rose Law Firm, join us. Thanks for joining us, Brent.
Good morning, everybody.
So, Brent, before we jump on in, why don't you tell us just how you, your family, and your firm are dealing with the quarantine sort of post virus fallout situation, and how you guys are handling the challenges.
Well, obviously, I think that it's easy to say that the challenges are sort of being dealt with by the hour. It seems like nowadays as we get more updated information. Luckily for Black & Rose, we were previously set up on a paperless work environment with regards to our operating system and whatnot. All of our attorneys already had the capabilities of working remotely, working at the boards and whatnot, off of laptops and such. But we did struggle with the staffing issue. Staff was not set up remotely, but about 3 weeks ago, we started to anticipate this problem and started to sort of foresee what was going to happen. We had heard some rumors about what was happening, and so we ended up setting up our staff as well. We are part of the essential category, so technically, I guess people could have come into the office. However, safety is our main priority for our employees. We want everyone to be safe, healthy, and trying to move forward with this. We're all working together. I think now more than ever, since every employee is at home, that everybody is really working together, which I think is something positive that's really going to come out of this thing, is that people truly understand and are helping each other sort of get through this pandemic and how to navigate it. We are happy to say that we are running 100% operational and moving forward with our claims.
Excellent. Well, glad to hear it.
How's your family all good, safe, healthy?
Yeah, family's good. My wife, she might be a little crazy right now. I got two high school teenagers at home. Luckily, their school has been completely electronic, so they actually have to log in about 9 to 1 every day and actually do schoolwork. So
they have like live classes that they need to do during specific times and all that?
Yeah, they have specific classes they still have to do, so they're still learning and going forward. But I think the sanity of my wife is questionable.
Yeah, I can second that for my wife, not for yours. But yeah, I think a lot of us are that's an interesting sort of dynamic that all of us that are working from home are having to entertain, is having to interact and find some space and try to have some time to yourself to be able to focus, to do what you need to do, but also deal with just family. I've got 3 kids. I know Zach's got a little one too. So those challenges, I think, are something that everybody has to consider in this environment, because it's uncharted territory, and everyone that's working from home is having to to deal with it.
Yeah, and one of the things that I have definitely put myself on the forefront on with regards to our firm is I was very concerned about people being isolated in their homes and basically them keeping their sanity. So we've actually come up with some pretty fun and creative things. Our firm internally, about 2 days a week at noon, we do these trivia games. We get everyone to participate via Zoom. We're trying to lift spirits. We do morning emails. Everyone sort of sends out what their office looks like that day, and people send out pictures of their meals, still trying to sort of keep the group together and keep everyone sort of sane, right? Because this COVID thing, if you watch enough news, it can seriously affect your mental well-being. So as a firm, we've sort of taken that approach that we really want to make sure that our employees stay healthy as well. And with that, you can have a little levity and some fun things you can do with your employees.
Yeah. Have you and your partner, Jim, looked down the road at all? I feel like with Josh and I and our team right now, we're trying to juggle 6 or 7 balls. And then once it gets back to normal and we're only juggling 2 pins, then it's going to be a breeze compared to what we're dealing with now. And just challenge and struggle breeds progress, I feel like. So have you guys looked down the road at all at hey, let's just get through this, and then it's going to be a breeze afterwards?
You know, I'm in. The board initially came out and said that they were going to be closed until next Friday. I think that is not going to be the scenario.
Go extend it.
I'm anticipating the boards are going to be closed down for at least another month. But you know, we're not really operating on a negative right now. We've come up with some very creative things on how to move cases right now. We're still doing hearings. We're still doing depositions. All of our depositions are either video or telephonic. So we're still able to move cases forward. And if you try to look down the road as to where we'll be, I think as an industry, and I think people as in a whole, actually, I think society in a whole is really going to come together after this pandemic sort of things. I think that is maybe some of the good that's going to come out of it is people are going to really sort of help each other, and hopefully, you know, everyone can unite and move out of this.
So you're not envisioning end of days, Walking Dead type scenario?
No, I tend to read between the lines when I look at this COVID-19 thing right now. I know that today, as a matter of fact, the news articles were saying that, well, the news is basically saying that we've now become the #1 country. That doesn't surprise me. We're probably one of the larger countries, and I don't know as if it's more infections. I just think it's more testing.
Yeah.
The percentages of death is obviously still a lower number, and I think it's devastating on any kind of death. But I'm hoping that we're going to really come out of this stronger. I think they're coming up with some great tools to hopefully come up with some sort of treatments and whatnot. But I just don't see it as quickly coming to an end as what maybe our president is currently thinking. But I think we'll ultimately get through it.
Yeah, got it. Well, let's go ahead and jump on into some questions, Brent. The most common question that we were fielding seems to be sort of consistent all the way around, is a lot of people want to know how this, if, or I should say when, some of these coronavirus workers' comp claims start to trickle in. Can you give us a rundown as to how it's going to be determined from a compensability standpoint, and just kind of dig into that a little bit?
Well, you know, it's all a lot of gray area right now, right? So there is nothing has really gone up as far as testing it. However, you know, the general rule in California is that in order for an injury to be occupational, you still have to show that it arose out of employment and during the course and scope of employment, and the injury or illness or disease, it must be caused by conditions that are particular at work. So, you know, there's obviously going to be some exceptions like doctors, nurses, people on the front lines and things of that nature. But, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty. Generally in California, flus and things like that are not deemed compensable. So I still think you're going to have to show that it did arise out of and in the course and scope of employment.
My wife is a director of insurance at a senior living facility, and one of their patients, or one of their residents got coronavirus, and the nurse taking care of him just tested positive for it. So they just got their first case. In that situation, workers' compensation would cover it, right?
Yeah, I definitely in that situation. You know, pilots, stewards, things like that. Even police officers, firemen that have to go on the scenes.
Cruise ship employees, probably.
Yeah, I can definitely see how those things definitely arose out of the course and scope of their employment. But you know, if you have
like a construction worker.
Well, I mean, construction worker is going to be a little bit more difficult unless maybe the employer knew that there was a guy there that had it
and still made everybody come in.
Right. And then you could have other claims, you know, serious and willful claims and things like that. But it's uncharted waters. It's uncharted territory. We're getting a lot of calls in our labor department from employers asking, you know, what's happening? What can we do about this? And it's basically, you know, we're going by the old law that's been in place, and that's what we have right now.
Do you think that the first couple that go all the way through are going to end up being case law that you refer down the road? Or do you think that
It's difficult to tell.
Crapshoot every single time.
It's difficult to tell based on I don't know what the fact pattern would be, or
okay,
what the situation would be. It would be. It's just difficult to tell on that answer. I mean, hopefully, with an illness like this, with this virus, I know that I still think that they're trying to determine what the long-term effects are after you've had it. I mean, I've read some studies that a third of the people who have had it didn't even know they had it, and they could be immune to it. So, I heard it causes respiratory things. There's a lot of things that could be, but I just don't know what the long-term effects of it are. It's like a flu. If I got a flu this year and it passed, and there is no permanent disability.
So, and I just thought of this, and you may know a little more than I do, but part of this government, not interference, but involvement in this whole thing is that the testing is free. The treatment is also free, correct?
That's my understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. So really, there's no the theory behind workers' compensation is just to make you whole. Right? I know we have an idea of where people just want a big retirement package at the end of the rainbow, but
sure.
The idea behind workers' compensation is to make them whole again, and it's already free. So why would workers' compensation pay anything if the government's already providing free treatment for it?
Well, like I said, treatment is one thing. Paying for treatment is one thing. But long-term effects on it is a whole different thing as far as permanent disability is concerned. You could have, from what I've read, you can have pulmonary issues that long-term effects on your body. But I don't know. I don't know what the effects are going to actually be, but the government could still be providing treatment, which would probably take a little bit of the onus off the employer. However, permanent disability and treatment are two totally different things.
Gotcha.
So that kind of actually leads to our next question, Brent. It's from Maria, who's a claims manager in Brea, and her question is as it relates to psych claims. So not so much people that contract the virus, but what about the potential for psych claims for people that work in an office or a facility where someone else contracts it, or simply the fear of them somehow contracting it and the stress and from that arising into a psych claim. So can you kind of dig into those couple scenarios?
Well, again, it really is uncharted waters, but I could see a psych claim coming out of it if, in fact, somebody did work with somebody else who was exposed to it. I'm not certain how long the ramifications would be of it. In other words, if one of your coworkers is diagnosed with it, then my understanding is essentially everybody, or even a friend or a family member, everyone should get tested. And if that test came back negative, I don't see any long-term effects from a psychiatric point of view, since you don't actually have it. So your fear of having it is sort of, it's gone, I guess. But I can see in situations where some of these people are quarantined and, they don't know if they have it, they've been exposed to it, and they could definitely have psychiatric implications from it. I don't know if there would be any long-term effects of it. It's really sort of the unknown. I've never seen a psych claim come out of a coworker, for example, that had a flu. So I think that is sort of an analogous to what COVID is. It is technically, I guess, a flu, a virus. I've never seen psych claims come out of that particular fact pattern. So I just don't know. Unfortunately, nobody knows right now.
Yeah, no, good point. A lot of uncharted territory in a lot of this. So one of the questions that we're getting quite a bit from employers, from carriers even, is how to deal with disability benefits as it relates to someone that was on modified duties that can no longer be accommodated because of a plant closure, or for whatever reason the employer now cannot offer those mod duties because of the local orders for them to close, or not being deemed an essential job function. So they can no longer accommodate the mod duty. So the two options, it sounds like, would be you either pay TTD or the potential for unemployment benefits. And there's a lot of sort of gray area there too. But what kind of guidance would you provide in that kind of scenario?
So if you have an injured worker, for example, and they're working in, let's just say, a factory, and they're doing modified duty of, I don't know, maybe no lifting over 10 pounds, for example, and the employer is able to accommodate that. COVID hits. We in California, as everybody knows, non-essential businesses, we got to shut down, social distance, go homes and things of that nature. So case law previously and sort of the cases in the precedent has always indicated that if the termination or your inability to work is not for cause, in other words, you weren't let go from your job because you were doing these mod duties or you did something wrong in the job, it's not for cause, but some sort of outside factors that are unrelated, I think you're likely going to be able to get temporary disability benefits, because you can't give somebody a modified duty and then the entire state has essentially shut down and then expect them to try to get another job somewhere else. It's not realistic right now. It's just everyone's got to kind of go home. I don't think it would fall into an unemployment situation, because that would mean the employer would be, I guess, essentially furloughing people. So if the employer furloughs people or terminates people, then you are entitled to get some sort of unemployment benefit. But it's likely that temporary disability would pick up based on case law and sort of precedent.
Yeah, and I think too, Brent, the danger of an employer or a TPA assuming that unemployment was going to pick up those benefits is, let's say they apply for it and they don't get a response for a week, 2 weeks, and then they get denied. Well, now they've gone 14 days without a payment. And now someone's going to be on the hook for penalties and interest, self-imposed penalties, things of that nature. So I would agree with that stance in err on the side of caution. Pay TTD, perhaps consider whether or not the unemployment benefits, maybe have them apply and direct them that way. But if they get denied, then it's a tough argument one way or the other. But I think the cons can outweigh the pros, especially if there's any potential for penalties and interest associated with not paying someone.
Yeah, that is sort of also in line with 9785, which sort of ended. You have to have a disability status every 45 days. Well, we're getting a lot of doctors that just simply aren't seeing the applicants right now. So what do you do if you don't have a medical report establishing disability every 45 days? There's going to be those that are going to want to terminate it. I don't know politically if that's probably the right thing to do, especially if the doctor's office is indicating that they're not doing examinations. It's sort of no fault of the applicant, but it's something that we were talking about in my firm the other day, as far as how can clients handle that. I think politically is probably the better answer with regards to disability benefits, because you can't go see the doctor right now. But again, there hasn't been a directive sort of changing that.
Got it. So let's discuss something that's kind of quickly changing, like a lot of these topics are, but the idea of qualified medical examiners or exams, the QME exams being done remotely. Can you kind of give us a little bit? I know there's something that popped up this morning on that. Can you kind of just walk us through what's being proposed, and also your thoughts, the pros and cons of those kinds of exams, not really being in different rooms and being in different locations altogether?
Yeah, so we actually started broaching this topic about 2 weeks ago. We had medical examinations that were already set up with PQME doctors, for example, and we spoke to several of the doctors, and some of them are doing remote. You need mutual consent from both sides to do that. And I actually think it's a good tool right now to do a remote sort of, I guess, Zoom as an application you can use, or FaceTime or something, because if you give the doctor the ability to at least review records, get a sense of the claim, and talk to the applicant, I know that their report wouldn't constitute substantial medical evidence because they didn't do a physical examination, if you're dealing with an orthopedic claim, for example. But I think it gives doctors sort of better tools to really look at the records. Sometimes they do exams, they've got 10 exams a day. They don't have a chance to look at the records. You oftentimes have to go question them. Why didn't you look at this report, that report? We've done about 5 exams in my firm over the last week that have been remotely. And the doctors have assured us that they are going to take the extra time to really look at the records, talk to the applicant, and then they're going to basically issue a preliminary report. And then once they're able to see the applicant, they're going to do a physical examination to sort of, I guess, qualify their reporting. So this morning, I actually got an email from my partner, Jim Black, and it indicated that there is a firm that is pushing to the DWC to amend the regulations to allow PQME doctors to do remote exams in the regulations for the time being. Many things have been changed in the regulations lately, especially with regards to court appearances. So it looks like there's a group that's really pushing to get those amended so that they can be done remotely. And again, I think it's a good tool. I am not an advocate from the perspective of putting everything on the pause, hit the pause button, and the claims are just sort of going stale. I'm really a big advocate for trying to keep things moving forward, keep exams moving forward, doing depositions remotely, which is what we're doing, either telephone or video. And because I think we're going to be sort of over this hurdle of this, safety in place, or whatever they call it anymore. I mean, there's like 10 names of, people staying at home and whatnot, social isolating and whatnot. So I think that we still have to continue to push the claims during this period. And then once we come out of this, we can still move forward on those. And it's helping the applicant, it's helping the injured worker, it's helping the employers, it's helping everybody.
That's a good point. So Brent, you and I talked about this offline a few times in the last couple of weeks, but the idea of post-termination claims popping up during this time because of sort of the mass layoffs that we've seen, and just, kind of traditionally and historically, what we've seen in any time there's mass layoff in those kind of situations is that we see a significant spike in post-termination, post-layoff claims.
About 15%, right, Josh?
Yeah, that's pretty consistent, about 20% of folks. So give us sort of your take on what an employer can do preemptively if they expect there's going to be layoffs, to avoid as many of these post-termination claims as possible, or to best position themselves to mitigate the cost of these claims.
Yeah, Zach actually broached this topic on LinkedIn this week as well, on Orion's LinkedIn page there, as far as what people are anticipating. And I think the consensus as far as their responses, as well as my own, is that I think it's pretty likely in some of those industries that are heavy labor intensive that you are going to see, unfortunately, these post-termination claims pop up. It's difficult at this point for an employer to really do anything to sort of combat them, because I guess the cat's already out of the bag. Everyone's already gone home. Before you have to send people home or terminate people to avoid post-termination claims, you can do a lot of things to, document, talk to the supervisors, whether or not anybody ever mentioned anything. You can have, exit interviews. Did you, suffer a WorkComp injury? But at this point, given that everybody has basically been sent home, it's going to be difficult to sort of go back and I guess unring the bell. But we just don't know. We don't know if people are going to come back to work. I was talking to our HR person 2 days ago, and this whole thing with furloughing people versus terminating people, Some people are furloughing. Some people are terminating with the option to come back and rehire them. So it's really difficult to even ascertain whether or not these people that have been sent home or furloughed are actually going to come back. I mean, we hope that the industries are going to recover. I know that there's going to be some businesses that are not, but hopefully we can get back and these people come back to work, and the employers aren't going to see a significant rise in post-termination claims. That's the hope.
So I'd like to put together a one-pager or some sort of post that we can put on the social media and website and all that, and basically a checklist of items that a defense attorney such as Brent would like to see if a post-termination claim does come in. Like, send me these 5 items. What are the 5 essential items to defend a post-termination claim?
So post-termination claims, to defend those, it really depends on the facts of the actual post-termination claim. If you have, 20-year employees that have been in the industry, working in labor industries, those are going to obviously be a lot more difficult because, as we all know, doctors are extremely giving, I guess, on the word continuous trauma.
Yeah, but for the people that are watching this, we need to speak in generalities. So, like, at minimum, in a perfect world, what sort of items would you like to see up front? Would you like to see the job description? Would you like to see the personnel file, interviews from coworkers, blah 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 blah? I'm not really a claims guy, so I'll just.
Well, look, personnel files are obviously very beneficial right in the beginning. Speaking to a supervisor, if it's possible, getting a supervisor's statement whether or not this person ever reported an injury, not only reported an injury, but made any complaints of pain. You can get information from coworkers. The more information you have to defend these things, such as witnesses who never saw anybody get hurt, things of that nature, personnel files and things of that nature, the more information you can get defense attorneys in the front, it's really going to help us, because we can then immediately try to litigate those items and get them to court while we still have the resources to do it, and it's fresh in everybody's mind.
Yeah, so one thing that we do is like time cards, or on their check, to get their check every couple of weeks, they have to sign every single 2 weeks or every week that, hey, I worked at 100% this week, no injuries, 100%.
Yeah, I've
Do
had
those help? Do those help when defending a claim? Like,
I've actually won on a post-termination claim with
good.
the exact fact pattern. It was a staffing agency. The employees had to come back to the staffing agencies on Friday to pick up their checks. They would basically sign a ledger that said they did not suffer any injuries that week. And I actually had, I think it was something like, 32 signed documents of this guy when he picked up his check saying that. And I went through every single one at trial, and ultimately we prevailed.
Including an exit interview form signed.
Exit interview form we didn't have. Those are obviously more difficult to get the exit. I mean, exit interviews are very, very, very important as well. Sometimes, it's just not feasible,
right.
But they help a lot.
Yeah, the one thing I would point out, though, too, Brent, in a termination situation where it's not an amicable split, obviously it might be tougher to obtain those. But in a layoff scenario where they may not be thinking workers' comp claim right off the bat, that could be potentially a little bit easier, or you might be more apt to get them to consider or sign it and do an exit interview in those situations. So that might be a good tool in this current environment, if possible.
Yeah, I agree. But like I said, everyone's home. The cat may already be out of the bag. Who knows?
Yeah. So Brent, I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned a bit earlier, and that what your firm is doing as far as remote depositions. I know you did one for our client either earlier this week or last week. So tell us what you learned during that process. Give us the pros and the cons, and sort of just your take on the process itself.
Well, remote depositions obviously aren't ideal. Position that I did on Monday for our client was an admitted injury And so we were really looking for information on prior treatments, doctor's information to get records and whatnot. So we could sort of, have an arsenal, I guess, to give to the doctor during a PQME evaluation. Denied claims, it's going to be, you'd like to have a little bit more of a face-to-face when you're deposing somebody. So on denied claims, we're doing everything via Zoom. So you're doing the video deposition versus a teleconference deposition. And I think that those are equally as useful. I think it's a great tool. We've received literally dozens of emails from court reporting companies that are scheduling these and doing it for free, frankly, right now, which is fantastic. So we're trying to keep every single one of our depositions on during this time so we can continue to move cases forward and get the discovery that we're entitled to.
Got it. Would you agree? And this is maybe kind of a more of a strategic question, but would you agree that the attorneys that are the best at sort of outside the box strategies and that have a strength is being communication skills, that they are going to be best positioned to kind of get these claims resolved in this current environment of delayed exams, delayed depositions, potentially delayed hearing dates? What is your kind of firm-wide strategy on being able to shut down claims and not have them drag on because of this 30, 60, 90-day lull that we're likely to experience in the industry right now?
Right. Well, I don't want to give away too many of our sort of quote unquote secrets that we've come up with as far as new policies and procedures that we have in place to move files. But I would say right now that communication is probably the biggest thing, and not communication via email. It's communication via phone with applicants' attorneys' offices. I have found that they are being extremely receptive to discussing settlements right now. And moving cases forward as long as you pick up that phone. If you're, I guess someone who tends to be a little bit more lazy and just does letters and doesn't follow through, those claims are going to sit. But we've established some pretty solid procedures and policies in our firm with regards to hearings and depositions and settlements and exams that I think are going to benefit our clients immensely. And the key to that is, like you said, it's picking up the phone and talking. I sit on court call all the time. I sat on court call yesterday. I had a hearing, and the amount of cases that came up and either applicant or defense side was not participating was staggering to me. I didn't understand it. I don't understand why you wouldn't continue to try to advocate for your client on issues when you still have that tool, of court call, and judges are very receptive to it. I set a case actually on Tuesday on an AOE COE priority conference trial. We were able to set it for trial. We did the steps and issues beforehand. We faxed them to the judge during court call, and I was actually able to set that case up for trial. So cases are still able to be moved. It's just people right now are kind of being lazy, and they're not trying to move them.
Yeah, so I agree. The outstanding communicators, the outside the box thinkers, I think they're the ones that are going to prevail during this slowdown in just in the process. And so I can definitely appreciate that approach. So Brent, there's going to be a lot of employers, carriers, just folks out there that are going to have questions about some of the things that you talked about today, or just specific questions, claim specific type questions. How can they reach you if they'd like some information on a claim or strategy and approach?
You can email me is probably the best method right now. Email me at brent@blackandrose.com. Spell out the word and, brent@blackandrose.com. And maybe put in the subject line, webinar question. That will help me sort of filter those out. And I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can.
Perfect. And lastly, I know there's been a lot of negativity on just in the industry, in the world, in the news world in general, the last several weeks. So why don't you finish us off on a positive note? What are some things that you're taking that you've done different? Just give us some good news to wrap this webinar up.
Well, good news is tough right now, obviously, but I think that if everybody sort of listens to what we're being told, which is to social distance ourselves, then we can definitely get over the hurdle of this thing and fight this thing. Actually, tonight with a couple of friends of mine, we're doing a Zoom happy hour. So try to communicate with your friends even to lift your spirits up. We're going to get through this. I know we're going to get through it. And once we're done getting through it, we're going to look back on it as a learning tool, I hope. I think that people are going to learn how we can come together as a society, and it's going to be just one of those things in our past. But I really, truly believe from everything I've been reading and everything I've been philosophizing with people is that we're going to get through this stronger without a doubt.
Excellent. And then I guess my final question is, what's the over-under on how many times you watched Mamma Mia the last 2 weeks? I'm going to set it at 3, but Zach, I'll let you weigh in on this before Brent responds.
I'd say over.
He's betting the over. Brent, what's the answer?
My wife just said I can't answer that.
I'll take the over then too. Hey, Brent, thanks for joining us today. It was a pleasure. We appreciate your insights as always. I'm glad that our folks will have an opportunity to reach out to you if they have any questions and concerns. I would like to do a part 2 with your employment law attorney, David Noose. I think there's a lot of overlap and a lot of questions that folks would have too. So anybody that's watching, keep an eye out for a part 2 of this segment with an employment law twist. And look forward to any questions, concerns anybody might have. Everybody stay safe out there, and looking forward to get through this. But as Brent mentioned, let's keep pushing through from a claims perspective. Keep moving your files forward. Press your attorneys to do the right thing. Stay in communication, and again, stay safe. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll talk soon.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Brent.